Hi everyone, and welcome to Nourishing Conversations. I'm your host Leah Williamson from Brisbane Paleo Group, and tonight I'm chatting with Kale Brock, and we've got a really nourishing conversation happening tonight all around gut health. So I'm really excited to share that topic. And as everyone's logging into the room, if you can just give us a little hi in the chat box and let us know that you can hear us. Just a few housekeeping tips. There is a little bit of a delay, so just bear with us if there's a bit of delay happening. Also, as soon as you think of any questions, just put them in the chat box. We'll collect them all, and when we get to question time, we'll make sure we're answering those. And most of all, have fun and get ready to listen, because we've got a really great nourishing conversation. So nourishing conversations are just those really great conversations that you have with people around health and wellness and fitness and well-being and all those great things. And you know, when you're just chatting to someone and the conversation's flowing back and forth and you really just get it, that's what a nourishing conversation is. So really looking forward to that. So yep, so if you can hear us, just give us a little hoy in the chat box. And we might get started. So welcome, Kale. Thanks for joining us for this nourishing conversation tonight. And
Thank you very much for having me.
Great. And I'm just wondering if you could tell everyone a little bit about yourself, about your journey, and why you're so passionate about health, about gut health.
It's a good question. I mean, I think it's very important to hear everybody's story about how they got into health. Mine started when I was 16 years old. I was diagnosed with a heart condition called supraventricular tachycardia, SVT, which is a technical way of saying that my heart was a little bit funky. So it was sort of out of rhythm, and I would experience these arrhythmias to the point of almost fainting. And as an avid surfer, I would, be out in the ocean all the time and have these episodes where I'd nearly faint, so it was quite a serious situation. So as you do, I went to the doctor and saw the cardiologist and all this sort of stuff, got hooked up to the ECG things, and, came back with this reading of a really high heartbeat at certain times. So the only option at that point was to undergo an ablation, which is where the doctors wanted to enter my heart. And this is at 16. They wanted to enter my heart and burn away a piece of the heart. So the piece of the heart they wanted to burn away was the sinoatrial node. And that's the part of the heart that's actually responsible for the communication, the electrical communication between the various four chambers. And that was responsible for that. So they wanted to destroy it because it wasn't working. And for me, that was a little bit illogical. Okay, there's got to be a better way. So I asked the doctor, what about nutrition? And he said, no, it's got nothing to do with it, as a lot of them say. But, his frank dismissal of any sort of nutritional factors really actually led me down that road more. And I started to question, and, as someone listening who's now become a journalist, I think doing some research was really quite easy for me. And it didn't take long to work out that amongst some other factors that were key to health, that gut health was this pivotal underpinning for the human body, and without it we really struggle to find good health. So that's why I've sort of started sharing that message a lot more, and there's a lot, but luckily now we're actually seeing a lot more coming out in the media, and it's really fantastic. It's bringing together science and health, and previously these two areas have been quite separate. Whereas now, with the research on the microbiome and the different bugs and parasites we have on and inside of us, we're seeing this wonderful connectedness of science and health. So it's fantastic. And I think we'll see a lot more good things to come.
Great. And certainly a very interesting story there, and great how you've been able to definitely turn it around. So tonight we're going to explore a bit deeper into the gut health, and we've got a few things we're going to look at talking about, and some of those are the microbes in our immune system, We're going to talk a bit about leaky gut and inflammation, and the big one, which is antibiotic resistance. Also, along with that, we've got quite a few results from the survey that everybody did before the webinar. So hopefully we'll be able to cover a couple of those topics there. Or if we can't cover those topics, we're going to be able to point you into some great resources. I've got a particularly good resource here with me, or two, and also talk about your upcoming Australian tour, which is really, really exciting. So, Kale, I'm going to hand it over to you to start a bit of discussion around microbes and our immune system.
Sure. Well, I think any conversation to do with microbes and the immune system has to come back to birth, because the birthing process is actually where this whole microbiome story starts off. When we're born naturally, we tumble down the birth canal, we're actually exposed to a lot of different microbes from mum and inherit those microbes, and they go on to form our own microbiome. Now, it's that mum's microbiome is a reflection of her environment and her diet and how she lives. So nature says in this wonderful way that, you know, whatever mum's doing, those microbes are going to help her thrive in that given environment. So we're going to pass those to baby so that baby has the best chance to thrive in that environment as well. So it's a wonderful system we have in place. Now, I spoke with John Ellerman about this on my podcast, who's a microbiologist, and he talks about the segmented filamentous bacteria. So it's like a long word, but basically these are these microbes that enter the system first. And what they actually do, they enter the baby system first. They actually downregulate the immune system. So they suppress the immune system for a short time. Do that because the immune system is wired that any sort of invaders, even probiotics, would actually mount an immune response, and they want to actually kick them out. But what these bacteria do, they actually go in and say, look, we're going to inherit all these microbes from mum, be they good, bad, or neutral. We're going to inherit them because that's what mum has decided is the best microbiome that we can have to survive here. So these microbes go in and they actually quell down the body and allow all those microbes from mum to actually come in and set up shop, if you will. They'll actually come in and they'll cruise, you know, and they'll make sure that they can set up a nice home in new. So that's where we start to see some important things happening. We start to see this communication between the microbes and our immune system. And what we're finding is that around 80 to 90% of the immune system is actually tied to this communication with microbes in the gut. So when these microbes are amongst the intestinal lining, they actually speak with the immune system, and they can upregulate inflammation, downregulate inflammation. And inflammation, as we know, is a key point to the immune system puzzle. And basically, when we have a gut that is overactive, or a gut that is sending out inflammatory messages around the body, as opposed to sending out helpful messages around the body, that's when we start to see immune system issues occur. And, you know, I think a lot of the people who wrote in tonight, autoimmunity, but oh, someone's just saying there's no sound. Hopefully that's just a isolated occasion there. So a lot of this stuff comes back to autoimmunity, where the body actually gets a little bit confused and can start to attack the body because it's receiving inflammatory messages from the gut. And then we start to see things like molecular mimicry. The body is actually turned on too much, and these different segments of food start to look like different segments of the body. For instance, gluten in the thyroid, or gluten in the joints, and so we've all heard about these different things. And the body, you know, we start to call that Hashimoto, psoriasis, we start to call it arthritis, when there's are often coming from the gut and a confused gut. So when the baby's born, they actually receive colostrum. So they've got that leaky gut when they're born. So their gut's a little bit open like this. When they receive colostrum from mum, it actually closes the gut back up, and molecules in colostrum have to go into the bloodstream straight away to really finalize that immune system process, you know, growth factors, immunoglobulins, things like that. So once the colostrum goes through, that then seals up and we have a healthy mucus starting to form in the gut lining. And that's when the microbes can adhere to that, and they can actually grow and proliferate and set up this wonderful inner ecosystem. And then mum's milk gets a little bit sweet, feed all those little microbes, and they start to thrive, you know. But obviously nowadays we're seeing with, you know, a massive increase in cesarean sections. I think in the last 15 years, we've had about I think we've doubled the rate, almost doubled the rate, from 18% to 32%. But the World Health Organization says that no region in the world has an excuse to exceed 30%, I think, or it could even be 20% or something like that. I'd have to recheck. But yeah, we're quite above the threshold there. We're very quick to offer C-sections. Now, C-sections can indeed save lives. We know that. We're not going to bash C-sections because they're definitely there for a reason. But what we need to do is acknowledge that initial process of birth, when done naturally, does pass on a microbiome to the child and is immensely important in the developmental microbiome of any child. So I think, yeah, that the microbes and the immune system story really comes back to when we're born, but it also comes back to even if we're born naturally and then we go and, you know, eat highly processed sugar-filled foods for the next 10 years, then we're also going to end up with a depleted microbiome. It's going to have low diversity. It's going to have high numbers of pathogenic bacteria and yeast and stuff like that. We hear a lot about candida. And then again, if we take antibiotics too often, if we take antibiotics for the common cold, like we're not supposed to do according to the world, we can really start to deplete the health of our microbiome. And that's when things start. Why now there's such a high need to reestablish gut health, and it's actually not that hard.
Yeah, definitely. And so just touching on that antibiotics there, and antibiotics resistance being a really big thing. So do you want to explain a little bit around that?
Yeah, so antibiotic resistance is basically if we have a little microbe over here and we have an antibiotic here. Antibiotic works, it comes and destroys the microbe, and the microbe goes away. But what happens over time is that these microbes can lend and swap genes amongst different species of microbes, which is really, really fascinating. So if we have microbe who's really fast, let's put it in some terminology that we'll understand. So super fast, and Susie over here is super slow. But Susie happens to have a lot of strength, and John wants some of that strength. So what he'll do fast is he lends some to John, and that actually helps out both parties. They can lend and swap these genes, which is super interesting. But what they'll do, they'll actually teach each other in that way how to avoid succumbing to antibiotics. So that means these microbes are becoming smarter than antibiotics. So Alexander Fleming, who discovered the penicillin mold and the penicillin, the first antibiotic back in 1928, he actually said that, you know, we're going to be morally responsible for playing with this, you know, this idea of antibiotics, because microbes are going to become resistant to them. And, you know, within only 2 years of using penicillin on a widespread scale, we actually saw resistance to it. And, excuse me, that's been the case with pretty much every single antibiotic we've brought into the market, we've seen resistance. I think daptomycin was the most successful one. It could be vancomycin, I'd have to check again, but that lasted about 16 years before we saw some big cases of resistance. And now, of course, it's a massive issue. And it's, you know, it's inspiring stories like Contagion and Iron Legend, these Hollywood movies and stuff, to come about. But this is a really serious issue, and the World Health Organization now is certainly starting to take the reins on this and coming down hard on doctors for over prescribing antibiotics. And, you know, it's a sad situation because the governments are trying to incentivize pharmaceutical companies to actually create new drugs that will work against certain microbes and stuff, instead of addressing the underlying issue. And, you know, pharmaceutical companies are actually saying now that they're going to stop making antibiotics because it's not financially viable for them to continue to do so, because they're just not going to work. So, you know, the future of our world really depends on us overcoming this issue. The British inquiry into antimicrobial resistance found that by 2020, if we don't fix this issue, we're going to have 10 million people a year dying from antibiotic-resistant infections. So that's a huge issue. You know, we're already seeing 10,000 people a year die. I think it's 2050. So by 2050, 10 million people a year dying. So it's a massive issue if we don't do anything about it, because you have to think about it. No more C-sections, no more heart surgeries, no more prosthesis, no more ENR medicine. You know, it's crazy. So we've got a lot of work to do. And, you know, when we look at how we've sort of approached microbes, we've taken on this approach that they were bad for so long, but it's only been in the last 10 years that we've started to appreciate that they're actually really helpful, and we wouldn't survive without them. So even the bad ones too. So we're starting to see now guys like Professor Martin Blaser, Dr. Martin Blaser, who's the head of medicine at New York University, so a very prestigious university. He's done a lot of research on H. pylori, which we previously thought was a bad bug. You know, we were told it was the stomach ulcer bug and it caused stomach ulcers. But he's found that it actually also regulates appetite, and it also trains our immune system. And, you know, it's only an issue, that bug, when it actually reaches a certain critical mass point where different genes get turned on and cause negative health issues. And that's what I talk about in my Heal Your Gut tour, is how through this thing called quorum sensing, how these bacteria actually talk to molecular signals. It's super interesting that they'll actually population density in any given environment. So let's say that H. pylori at this level is actually quite healthy. And, you know, that's when we see these appetite modulating effects, you know, come in, and the immune system effects come in. But when H. pylori gets to this level, and this is just one example, that's when different, and it changes and actually can cause the stomach ulcers. So that comes back to that whole point that we actually want to create a system in the gut that doesn't allow for the growth or the uncontrolled growth of these potentially negative microbes. And that comes down to having really nourished, well-fed probiotic bacteria and a nice wide variety of.
Yes, definitely. It's a definite epidemic that's going on there. And now people are probably listening and they're like going, you know, that's a lot of information there that you've shared. What's something, you know, what's one of a few things that they can do just to get started?
Yeah, sure. So often, this is why in my talk I sort of set up, and then we come in and save the day at the end. So there is something you can do. The best thing you can do is to start, just a blanket recommendation for everybody, is to start eating whole unprocessed foods and eat a varied diet. That's number one everyone should be doing to increase their microbiome health. the digestive health foods. You know, it's relatively easy to say that. Now, some people, or quite a lot of people, to be honest, still have health issues, and they've been doing that for their whole lives. So it's very hard for us to just say that that's enough. It's actually not. And that's when, you know, some good integrative practitioner care can come in, a good GP and stuff. But there's also some steps through in terms of healing the gut and wiping the slate clean, because a lot of people now really need to go back to basics and find their template ecosystem. Because remember that those microbes that come in first, that, you know, a microbiologist talk about and suppress the immune system, it's those microbes that are going to work best for you and your body, because your immune system's, you know, according to microbiologist Julia Enders, who wrote the book Gut, the most bacteria we see in the human experience are the lactobacillus bacteria and the bifidobacterium bacteria. So that's where generally I tell people to go in terms of supplementation. So, you know, supplementing with probiotics is a really good idea to maintain gut health. Large doses of probiotics. Now, you want to make sure that you're getting a therapeutic dose, because a capsule once every 2 days is not going to give you enough probiotics to actually have a large impact on your microbiome. Remember, we're dealing with trillions and trillions of microbes. So to have an impact on a population that size, we need to actually go into the numbers of probiotics. So that's where I'm a big fan of symbiotics, prebiotics and probiotics, to getting them together and actually getting high numbers that way. But then again, you know, if someone needs to start really small, and perhaps this is where Dr. Natasha Campbell McBride's approach comes in, and that's where, you know, you're using very specific strains of probiotics in smaller numbers and building up slowly from there. But that all depends on you and your unique body. But chances are, generally speaking, that lactobacillus strains and bifidobacterium strains are going to work best for you, and get them in really high numbers. And then again, we come down to the whole grain and resistant starch argument. You know, what should we be eating to feed our gut microbes? I tend to think that, you know, the Australian government might be overestimating the benefits of resistant starch, because we've got so many food here in Oz. You know, there might be a little bit of a conflicted interest there, but that's just my opinion. The research definitely shows that probiotics feed off resistant starch and different starches, prebiotics, and are nourished by them and produce more healthy digestive acids after eating those. So I think, you know, going towards more vegetables is a better way to actually get those starches in. So having a lot of carrots and beetroots and a lot of garlic and fennel and leeks and, you know, the allium family does have a lot of good prebiotics in there. So, and then you've got fruits as well, you know, apples, berries, bananas have a lot of resistance, even almonds, avocados. All these unprocessed foods have a lot of for your good bacteria. But, you know, some people need to actually just come way back and take more of a GAPS approach, you know, to really wipe that slate clean. Because if you've got, you know, if you've got a candida overgrowth, if you've got unhealthy bacteria, even having some carrot juice or some having some apples or some berries and stuff like that can still feed those pathogenic microbes. So for a while, at least, you might have to even cut out those, and that's yeah, that's certainly an issue for some people. And Vanessa just asked, is it always necessary to take a prebiotic while you're taking a probiotic? No. So you should be getting prebiotics from food. I'm not a huge fan of taking prebiotics on their own. If you're using a symbiotic formula where you're mixing probiotics and prebiotics, that could definitely work. But taking prebiotics, generally not necessary, because you can get it from food. You really don't want to supplement anything that you can get from food. You know, there are a few things I believe we can't, you know, some minerals and trace elements, a few other little things that we're missing these days. But certainly I believe in taking probiotics more, and then feeding those probiotics with a good, healthy, clean diet. Amber said, I take Inner Health Plus is that a waste of time? In Health Plus, the guys have really good strains of probiotics, so they have excellent strains in there, but the numbers are probably not high enough to have a therapeutic dose. Now, if someone was too sensitive to high amounts of probiotics, which is certainly the case with some people, I've seen it. When I used to do health coaching, I used to see some people not coping well with these large doses, these therapeutic doses of probiotics. They'd get the bloating from the die off, and they'd get a little bit uncomfortable. So we'd get them started off on some dairy-free inner health for at least, a couple of months before shifting them over to a dose of probiotic. Fermented foods, yeah, good question. So with fermented foods, you've got to watch the strains of bacteria. So remember what I said about the immune system working best with certain strains of microbes. That's those lactobacillus strains, the bifidobacterium strains. Initially, those are best. If you've got a leaky gut and you start putting in things like Saccharomyces boulardii and these other beneficial yeasts and stuff, they can still cause a negative immune reaction, because you've got a leaky gut, and those microbes start moving into the bloodstream and causing the immune system come on and cause inflammation. That's why some people get rashes and they get really uncomfortable when they have those different things. So it depends where you're at with your health. I'm a huge fan of fermented foods. I taught workshops for years, and we've got the online course and everything, but it depends on your personal health situation. It's really hard for me to give a blanket recommendation regarding that. Can you please suggest some pre and probiotics? There are some good ones out there. We've got on the Gut Health store, which I started a few years ago, which is nicelife.com.au. We've got a few good ones on there. And then generally, if you go to a good naturopath or a good practitioner, they'll be able to recommend some good ones as well. There's certainly not just one probiotic now, because we've got so many good companies coming out with some stuff. It's certainly a competitive market, which is good for us. It's nice. Thank you for writing that in there. So yeah, can't remember where we were with that, but I think I've answered a couple of there. I'll let you direct it.
No, that's all right. That's fine. That's great for jumping in. It was really relevant at the time, so that's no problem at all. I was just going to show everyone you've got a book, the Art of Probiotic Nutrition. It's your book there, with some really great recipes and how to make kombucha and different ferments and some great names. There's a Pina Kombucha Colada. That sounds pretty cool. And so that's a good resource to have there if anyone's looking for some great recipes and ways to do it. And then your other book too, the Gut Healing Protocol. So that's 8 weeks, some great recipes in there, really simple to use recipes, and it's basically like your whole guideline on where to start and how to, and it runs you through what you should be doing to help with those gut issues that you're having. And also you're about to embark on a Australian tour. So do you want to talk a bit about the Australian tour and how you're coming to Brisbane and the Gold Coast as well?
Yeah, sure. So the Art of Probiotic Nutrition, that first book is a fermented foods recipe book, and the second book is more on topic tonight. So the Gut Healing Protocol, a lot of the various methods used by practitioners around the world, and also gives some of the scientific supporting that. And from that book is where the Heal Your Gut tour actually came from. So that tour was initially, we decided on like a book launch for that book. We'll go and talk about the gut, and I'm like, no, I think we should actually turn it into an event where people can walk away with some really actionable steps to, whether it be they cut out processed food for one, or whether it be they add certain prebiotic foods and stuff like that, or whether it be they actually take that 8-week strategic approach that I outline in the book. And certainly, as you can see, as you would have seen on the website, there's a lot of people who have done that and have had amazing results, and it's not what I love about it is that it's not my idea. You know, it's not like when I was taught when I was, 16 to 18, I worked with some very good people, very good naturopath here in Adelaide, who are still fantastic. So she actually taught me a lot of that information. And then I went around as the journalist and actually found that guys like Dr. Perlmutter and guys like Dr. Raphael Kelman and a lot of the female integrative practitioners out of the US and Australia were using these methods to heal the gut and decrease people's inflammation and help them lose weight and help them attain that clarity of mind and help them deal with their issues that weren't going away. Because it seemed like there are a lot of health issues now that aren't responding to typical treatments. And that's a big thing, because as much as we can do paleo and stuff like that and how it's going to solve a lot of our problems, which I think it certainly does in a lot of ways, there are times when people need to take a very specific and strategic approach to their health, because we've been so specific and strategic about destroying our health, with the current medical approach. And that's what I was led down for such a long time, unfortunately. And I say unfortunately, it was probably a good thing to where I am today. So in that event, we outline how microbes work and they work with the human body, but then we outline the 5-step guide that I use, the 5-step process to actually healing the gut. And we give people a whole bunch of information. Vanessa said, what is your opinion about maltodextrin as a prebiotic? Because so sometimes it's not too bad as long as it's not GMO. What is your opinion on wheat and gut health? I don't think the two go together very well, unfortunately. And if you don't know much about that, I would go and read up on Professor William Davis, Dr. William Davis, and also have a look at the research of Professor Alessio Fasano out of Harvard Medical School. And we'll actually talk a lot about that on the night, because we go into why we don't recommend having wheat, sugar or dairy, at least while you're on the protocol, at least while you're on a gut healing journey, if not forever for some people, unfortunately. And it's not that those are evil foods. I think they can work. It's just what we've done to them these days. And we go into a bit of the science on that as well. So it's a really fantastic event. We're giving away lots of prizes and stuff, but the key point there is that people walk away feeling a little bit more empowered about gut health and some steps they can take to actually better their own gut health. And I try and make sure it's fun and entertaining as well. If you've seen me on Facebook and stuff, you know that I'm a little bit cheeky. So I do like to make sure that it's fun and people are having a laugh and enjoying themselves, because that's so important. If we get too serious, if we take ourselves too seriously with this health thing, we're going to attract too much negative attention. So yeah, I think it's a really good event. I'm proud of it.
Yeah, great. And just something about that too. One person wrote in around how emotional distress can upset their gut as well. So it is really good to have a happy, fun event to get everyone's guts happy while you're doing the event. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to you coming up to Queensland. The Brisbane events, we've sold quite a few tickets, isn't there? So there's not that many left. If people are thinking about going, they should get the tickets soon.
I think there's about 8 left.
Yeah, and that's at Stafford Wellbeing Chiropractic and Wellbeing Centre, and we've got some great samples from Lewis and Son. They make really delicious ferments. So I just had some of their beetroot kimchi tonight with my dinner, which was really delicious. Yeah. So yeah, looking forward to a really fun event to get our guts happy. And and just going back to that, so do you want to talk a little bit about maybe a little bit about gut and emotional health and the effect on the gut as well, because that's a really interesting area too.
Super interesting. What science is basically is in between the gut communicating all the time. We also see that around 90% of your neurotransmitters, that's those important brain chemicals, are actually being manufactured in the gut. So very, very important. And if we have inflammatory messages being sent from the gut to the brain, we see inflammation coming up in the brain. And that's where we're starting to see a lot more, neurological issues now, and certainly a lot of mental issues now, mental challenges and stuff, which are having a huge impact on the world, obviously at this time, particularly. So there are huge implications on this. And, I think, as always, regardless of where the future takes us with health, I think there are some really timeless health principles. And that really comes back to you becoming your own inner nutritionist. So really getting in touch with that communication between your gut and your brain and listening to your body. Because, in 4 years' time, perhaps instead of talking about microbes, we'll be talking about happiness and meditation or mindfulness. It's going to change because there are some transient properties to the health message, but I think the principles are what's most important. So, eating in line with nature, finding time to get into a flow state, so finding your meditation or your whatever your meditation is, like your surfing or your lawn bowls or your tennis or whatever it is, finding time to have fun. I think those things are really important too, and they certainly have a massive impact on your mental health, and that in turn has a positive impact on your physical health. So it goes both ways for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And even eating in a calm state, and I'm sure you go through this in your talk too, is, we spend so much time eating at our desks and, eating on the run and eating in the car and things like that. And all that has a really big effect on your digestive system as well. So there's just so many different aspects to the whole gut issue, isn't there?
Yeah, it's a whole system. It's a very complex system, and I think we're still in the early stages of understanding it. But a lot of that blanket research is setting the foundation for our approach into the future, and I think that it'll become much more strategic and specific and much more successful into the future as well. There's a lot of success happening now. Michelle said, if someone has inflammatory condition, is the 8-week protocol enough to make a real difference? Or is it a very individual situation? Yeah, it's a very individual situation. But that being said, I've seen some huge results on the protocol. My mum actually had a inflammatory arthritis condition where she had a cyst growing in her knee. She had it cut out 3 times coming back, and then we actually put her on this protocol. She didn't even follow it properly, by the way. She had a little sneaky bit of champagne, and we actually were able to dissolve that cyst. And her doctor said, whatever you're doing. So, and I've seen a lot of stuff come down, like psoriasis and just any sort of autoimmune stuff come down using good principles. But it's always got to be tweaked per the as per the person and their lifestyle and their needs and stuff. But my whole thing is, why not start with a whole foods whole list and then start from there? Because the worst thing that's going to happen after 8 weeks is that you're in a better state of it, and you're better off going to get treatment in a better state of health and working with a good integrative doctor than if you're in a state of poor health. So certainly I believe anyway, and certainly it's been my experience, that no harm in doing a good gut healing protocol. And I think mine in my book is how do I find out more? You can just go to the website, Amber, about the 8-week program. So you can just go to kalebrock.com. I'll let Leah write that in there. Yeah, it's just kalebrock.com. So it's everything's on there, basically, about the tour and everything. It's all on there. So, and there's a bunch of testimonials on there too. And we've got a Facebook group and that, so you can always sort of ask people how they went and ask for some stuff. But yeah, if you do if you do have a serious health condition, it is a good idea to work with a good integrated GP and even just take them the book. You know, I've had a lot of my clients do this. They take the book to the practitioner and say, hey, I want to do this. Any tweaks or things I should consider before doing it? And they'll actually, you know, look at it. And most of them just, you know, have their own little tweak on things, but it's all quite holistic and it does work.
Yeah, certainly in the Brisbane Paleo group, we've got quite a few, a listing of integrative doctors. So if anyone's needing to find those, you can just look in the file section of the Facebook group. So yeah, some great questions coming through. And I'm going to ask you a question, which I didn't prepare you for, but what does a day of eating look like for you?
It's a funny question because it changes quite regularly, because I'm quite in tune with my body these days. You know, I just went through a period of about, I would say 12 weeks where I didn't feel like having eggs for breakfast. And then it's only in the last sort of week that I've actually started craving them again. So I listened to that because I think it's important to listen to your body. So during that time off eggs, I'd been doing some more carbohydrate stuff. So like some gluten-free cereals, like your raw granolas and stuff like that, some chia pudding and stuff. It's also because I've been exercising a lot more, so surfing a lot more, less strength training, more aerobic. So I find my aerobic training tends to demand a little more carbohydrate intake, whereas my strength training, if I'm doing that, I'll need more eggs and fats and proteins. So that's an important thing to consider. And then at the moment, I've just been doing like green smoothies for lunch, maybe with a can of sardines. Maybe, you know, if I don't have time, or if I have some leftovers, like some lamb. No. Definitely not. No, so they're on the side. So yeah, and then dinner's normally like a family affair where we have a big salad with some veggies and maybe a little bit of meat or a non-meat meal. Or if I'm in a rush, like we might eat out and get some Thai. I always like to get curries. We love a good curry. So it's a very normal diet. It's just being quite clear about foods. That's my big no-no. And generally gluten and dairy aren't always there. It's certainly gluten, but every now and then we'll have a little bit of butter or some good quality cheese or something like that. But, you know, whilst if I was doing the gut healing protocol, it would look quite different. And I do try and do it every now and then, you know, once a year or whatever. So, yeah, and that's where we start to get a little bit more stringent on anti-inflammatory foods. But yeah, you know, I'm pretty lucky to experience good health these days. So I don't need to be too crazy about restricting my diet. And I don't think it's healthy to do that anyway on a long-term basis. I really think we need to have that whole idea that health is a marathon. It's not a sprint. So going on and off a health program is not the way to win. It's actually staying on one that works for you long-term. Bit of raw chocolate every now and then and some raw cake and bliss balls. Even though someone says that you can't, you know, a couple of times a week, I think it's a good thing. It is about balance overall, but you know, when it comes to gut health, balance is key, but it's also, we've got to get a little bit strategic as well.
Yeah, that's a really sensible approach. A little bit of champagne if you're your mum every now and then too.
For me, it's kefir.
Yeah. Or your pina kombuchalata or whatever.
Okay, so there's the last question. Do you think eating less animal products helps with gut healing? That depends on the person as well. So in the protocol, we suggest having animal protein in your diet, definitely, because it helps with blood sugar in a big way. But we also suggest having, you know, this much animal protein versus this much veggies, you know, so it's always more plant foods and more vegetables than animal protein. And you certainly don't have to have animal protein at every meal. The only way that animal products would damage the gut is if they stay in the gut too long, and that would come from eating too much animal protein or not having enough hydrochloric acid, or not having enough protein digestive enzymes in the system, which will come from the pancreas being stressed or not enough probiotic bacteria. So generally animal products are pretty good for gut healing. They've got some good amino acids in there, particularly bone broth. Very, very good. And fish.
Yeah, great. And if anyone does have any last questions, get them in there, because we're going to wrap up soon. So I did have a couple on the survey. We were going back to, there was one we had that was around endurance. So someone was asking around digestion and efficiency during extreme endurance events. So have you had any experience with anything like that?
So adrenal.
Extreme endurance events and digestion and efficiency during those.
Okay, cool. So the biggest issue with a lot of endurance athletes that I've worked with, or at least heard from, is that they hit the wall too early, or they get serious digestive issues before the race and during the race, to the point where they have to run to the side of the track and poo in the poo there, which is, it's pretty intense. So one of the best things you can do there is to actually work out a way to decrease that digestive stress under pressure or under the load of exercise. So I think a really good thing to do for them is to actually eat wholesome, non-processed foods, but also to balance their microbiome in a big way. In terms of hitting the wall, and that's all about becoming fat adapted. So Steph Lowe is a good nutritionist out of Melbourne who's actually written about that. She's got a book called I can't remember the name of it, but if you look up Steph Lowe, it's The Real Food Athlete, I think it's called, and that's all about becoming more fat adapted. And certainly I think when you eat real food, there's no issue with endurance training. The biggest difference there between the regular person is that athletes require more carbohydrates generally, because they need to replenish their muscle glucose a little bit more, so they can handle more carbohydrates.
Great. So I just didn't check then. So no more questions yet. So if people want to know more, they can certainly go to your website, which we put up before, which is kalebrock.com.au. You've got your great books there, the Gut Healing Protocol 8-week book, which is this one, which is a really great book with really simple recipes in it, guides you through. And this one is your probiotic nutrition, the art of probiotic nutrition, with the great recipes in there as well. And definitely coming along to your events around Australia. Mm-hmm. So I put up the Brisbane link and the Gold Coast link as well. So we're really looking forward to having you up here at the end of August. And it'll be a bit warmer for you rather than being down in freezing cold Adelaide.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah. So thanks so much for having thanks so much for having a chat with us. Michelle says thanks so much. That was really interesting, and she's really looking forward to coming to the Brisbane event. So that's fantastic. I'm really looking forward to it as well. And I guess at that event, if people have any further questions, you've got a bit of time there to answer questions if they come along to the event, and have a chat to them there about that as well. Yeah.
Absolutely. I can't give out medical advice, but I can give you my best opinion.
Yeah, great. And Amber said, great, she's just booked for the Gold Coast event. So awesome, Amber.
Good.
And Vanessa's saying, thanks, great info. So yeah, so that's really cool. So thanks so much. Yeah. And thanks everybody for listening in on a Sunday night and staying up late. If for me it's a bit late. I like to go to bed early. But and But great talking to you. And Amber's just asking whether she can buy your book at the event, but you'll definitely have those there, won't you?
Yeah, you can.
Yeah. Will you sign them for us?
Yes, if you really want it, I can.
Great. All right. Well, thanks everyone. Good night. And thanks so much, Kale, for joining us tonight.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, and thanks for doing what you're doing.